Hey leaders, just want to say welcome to our first leadership meeting where we have two cohorts getting together to hang out, and we hope you guys are having a good time with each other. If you guys just showed up, I want to encourage you guys, take 30 minutes and just spend some time together. Grab some tea or mocha, hang out with each other, see how your week's going, and just have some relaxed love relationship time. But we're going to go into just some worship, and we recorded some worship earlier this year, and so we want to just spend a few minutes here as we're focusing on fighting for our campus and fighting for our friends, and how do we minister to our world right now. I want to take a few minutes to make sure that our heart and our minds are focused on really the reason for why we think through this and why we wrestle the way we do for our campus and our small groups. And so as we go into worship, let's keep our focus and our heart on gratitude and glorifying God here tonight. So let's go and do that now.
Father, by your grace we come, beloved daughters, rescued sons, gathered in your saving love. Father, by your grace we come. Let your children bless your name, and every heart now seek your face. Let this room erupt in praise. Oh, let your children bless your name. Hallelujah. Pour your heart out to the Lord. Bend your knees, come and adore the one who is your life, your joy. Pour your heart out to the Lord. Give us a vision of your love, Lord. Let us fall in love with you again. Give
a vision of your love, Lord. Let us fall in love with you again. 'Cause you are more beautiful than anything, more beautiful than anything, Jesus. 'Cause you are more beautiful than anything, more beautiful than anything, Jesus. Give us a vision of your love, Lord. Let us fall in love with you again. Give us a vision of your love, Lord. Let us fall in love with you again. Give us a vision of your love, Lord. Let us fall in love with you again. Give us a vision of your love, Lord. Let us fall in love with you again. 'Cause you are more beautiful than anything, more beautiful than anything, Jesus. 'Cause you are more beautiful than anything, more beautiful than anything, Jesus. I love you, God, and all my life is for you now. I love you, God, and all my life is for you now. I love you, God, and all my life is for you now. I love you, God, and all my life is for you now. I love you, God, and all my life is for you now. I love you, God, and all my life is for you now. I love you, God, and all my life is for you now. I love you, God, and all my life is for you now. I wanna sit at your feet, drink from the cup in your hand, lean back against you, feel your heartbeat. This love is so deep, it's more than I can stand. I melt in your peace, it's overwhelming. I wanna sit at your feet, drink from the cup in your hand, lean back against you and feel your heartbeat. 'Cause you are this love is so more beautiful than anything, more beautiful than
When I was in crew at the University of Idaho, there was this Chi Alpha ministry that I'd seen around, and sometimes our ministries would interact a little bit. They actually had a worship team that was better than our team at crew, and so when we had retreats, sometimes we would have the Chi Alpha guys and gals come and do the worship for our retreats. Funny, because their Chi Alpha was very, very small, and our crew ministry was very large, but they had the better worship team. So we'd have them come, and through that I'd kind of see the way that they loved God and the way they worshiped and the way that they talked about faith and ministry. And I think they, in fact, through that invited us to a little kind of dig in, if you will, that they were doing later that semester. And so I ended up stopping in at this event. I didn't know anything about Chi Alpha, but I just kind of had seen their guys and gals doing worship for us at different retreats. And suddenly I realized through this dig-in some things about their ideas of truth, who God is. And really, ultimately, what I realized is through those interactions in hindsight, even though they were small, I had no commitment to Chi Alpha. I had no interest in being part of Chi Alpha. I was committed to my ministry, and I was grateful for it, and I'm still grateful for that time with that ministry. They taught me a lot. But in reflection, I realized that when I transferred to the University of Northern Colorado and really felt led by the Lord to go there, I told the Lord, I said, God, if there's a Chi Alpha at UNC, I would love to check them out. And when I showed up, at the time, funny enough, there was a very large ministry on the campus, but I had no interest in being part of that large ministry. What I wanted to be a part of was Chi Alpha. And Chi Alpha at that time was again, it was pretty small. There was a lot of things about it that pretty different than what your guys' experience has been in Chi Alpha, good or bad. But yet, I realized the experience I had, those encounters I had with Chi Alpha, where I learned something about what it meant to them to do community, their emphasis in discipleship, their openness to the Holy Spirit, and the experience of the truth of God through their lives and the experience of what that meant in their community. So impacted my perception of how I wanted my faith to look in college that I didn't care about the bigger ministries or the more impactful ministries on the University of Northern Colorado. I just committed to Chi Alpha, and I wanted to be part of them. And so this idea of people, before they commit to something, have to experience something first. And that's really the core of what we mean when we say fight for. You know, we oftentimes use kind of this maxim, find people, fight for them, and feed them the kingdom. But what do we mean when we say any one of those terms? And there's some intuitiveness to it, but if you kind of dig a little deeper, it may not be quite as intuitive as you originally thought. But to us, when we say fight for someone, what we're saying is that we want to fight for them to experience us, our friendship, the potential of that relationship. We want to fight for them to have an encounter with our friendship. Or we want to fight for them to experience our community. And we certainly, through both of those things, want them to experience Jesus. And the commitment, the goal of this is to create a desire for commitment in their lives. But the desire for commitment is, when we're talking about a small group, is we're fighting for them to experience our friendship, our community, and our God, so that they would commit to our community. They would commit to our small group that we're trying to create. And that's what you guys really have done at the beginning of the school year. As you went out there, you found people to fight for. And when we talk about fighting for, there's always two components to it. There's always invitation. It's like, hey, come into my worlds. Come see my community. Come, experience, Outpost Live and hear the proclamation of the truth of the gospel. Like, it's invitation and it's pursuit. It's going into their world. It's pursuing them where they're at. And sometimes that's in time and space, like physically stopping by their dorms, or sometimes that's pursuing their heart or their mind. you can even think how Jesus says, love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. In the same way, we pursue people in each of those areas. You know, in strength, we pursue them, you know, physically in time and space, and in their hearts, we try to pursue their true self, trying to get to who they really are, and creating a space where they can be vulnerable and authentic, and pursuing that emotional side of their life, or maybe that mental side. What are your thoughts on God, or what are the mental roadblocks to, you know, knowing God? So we pursue that knowledge base in their life, right? So in the same way that we pursue God by loving Him with our mind, heart, soul, and strength, we can do the same idea with people. We can pursue that, and we can invite them into places where they'll grow in that place of growing in that walk with Jesus. So why am I talking about that? You know, we're towards the end of the school year. We're well into kind of this feeding season, right? Why are we talking about fighting for people? Well, I was just thinking, you know, we were thinking about the future here, in the immediate future, some of the resource leaders and myself. And how many of you guys have ever had someone who, especially you small group leaders who maybe have done this for a couple of years, how many times have you had someone who was in your small group community, and yet after the break, you had a real hard time connecting with them again? Or after a certain season, things somehow just changed, and the commitment to you in that small group community changed with it. And the thing we have to remember is that when we say we are finding people to fight for so that we can feed them, what we're fighting for is for them to commit to our small group. But our small group, remember, our small group is not the weekly meeting. It has a weekly meeting, but it is the community of people around my life that I'm doing life with. But that comes with all kinds of rhythms. When we say doing life with someone, we're talking about like you have either a rhythm of just being together at the same time every week, like, hey, Friday nights we just hang out, or sometimes that's a rhythm of a component of your life that you express together, like, hey, let's do homework together every Sunday afternoon, and you kind of do that part of your life together. But when you get into a new season, those things change in their life. You're no longer doing life with them. The rhythm of life together has changed. And so the commitment to that relationship has changed also. That, yeah, I was committed to hanging out with you guys on Tuesday nights for your small group meeting, and grabbing groceries with you on Saturday afternoon. But it's a new semester, and it's a new rhythm. And we're going to walk into a season here pretty soon where we're going to be basically in a new rhythm, right? After spring break, that's here in a couple of weeks. And after spring break, a lot of students aren't going to be here. Even those who are here are going to be doing a different rhythm of life at some level. And so we have to go back to fighting for that relationship in that season. We can't hold on to the idea that we're in a feeding season right now and think that relationship that we have forged in this rhythm of life is going to continue into the next rhythm of life. And so we have to go back into that fighting for moment. We have to fight for that friendship again. We have to fight for those experiences and those encounters with our friendship, now forged in a new light because of their new rhythms and your new life post spring break and the rhythms of our lives. So we want to talk just a little bit about that for a few minutes, and particularly how do we pursue people. And here in a little bit, we're going to talk about how do we invite people. And so the first thing, and we're going to have some discussion in between these things. And so you guys as cohorts, the goal of your cohorts being together is, hey, give you guys some opportunity to kind of learn from each other. You know, just kind of a funny term that's sort of apt at the same time, but you know, you kind of learn how to cross-pollinate. Like what you guys know how to do, you kind of you spread that somewhere else. And maybe there's some things that your cohort does well that the cohort that's with you today can learn from, and vice versa. And so I just encourage you guys, be real, be open. talk with each other as we go through these different conversations and questions. But a couple of things that I just want to highlight is in our ministry, I really think that this idea of pursuit and invitation, really this core concept of fighting for people, that's the secret sauce of our ministry. I mean, that's the secret sauce of Chi Alpha. You know, when I talk with pastors or ministers in other areas, and we start to define how we empower you guys to really minister. You know, everybody tries to find a way to encourage their congregation, if you will, to feed. And typically the ministries have a big emphasis on finding, and sometimes they utilize the congregation. Although statistics would suggest that the modern church today has over, I believe, 90% of the people in it will never invite anyone to a service of any kind. But all the same, a good church will still do finding through their people. But this idea of fighting for people, I remember talking with Derek Britt, who's kind of my counterpart in Indiana, and he came from a megachurch environment, and they had an incredible small group ministry where people were really being fed well. But he said, when I got into Chi Alpha, it radically forever would change my whole understanding of what ministry meant, because he suddenly realized you could actually empower people to pursue people when they walked out of the doors of the church building. And that idea, at the best, it was invitation, but the idea that you could ever pursue, that was a whole new way of thinking about ministry, and yet is at the core of the gospel. I mean, isn't the whole concept of the gospel the idea that God pursued us in our world, that he came near to us, that he, through the cross, was pursuing our true selves, that through his life, that he was pursuing us in time and space, that in the ministry of the gospel, that he was pursuing the emotional side or the physical side of our needs and our wants and our desires and our struggles and all of that. Like Christ was pursuing us in everything that he did. And so isn't it amazing to think that that is something that we get to do as well? So how do we pursue these guys and gals? When we hit spring break here soon, how do we not lose the momentum that we have built in the season of feeding them the kingdom convictions in our lives? And hopefully one thing that hopefully you guys have been doing well is helping them grow a Devo life, which is something that can be sustained, you know, something that can become a habit of their life that we want to encourage in the next season. They need to learn to feed themselves while they're maybe away from the community that's fighting to feed them as well. But there's some things that we can do along the way to help. And right now, one thing that we can do is we need to set up this next season by using a lot of future talk. So do a lot of future speech. Do a lot of talking about your life and your friendship and your community after spring break. Now that might mean like setting up, just talking about like practical things, you know, like, hey, you know, we're gonna still do our weekly meeting, you know, hope is, you know, Tuesday night. Does that still work for everybody once you come home and, you know, start having dinner with your parents? You know, do we need to change that time? Do we need to change that space? Right, so it can be practical. I would say focus on that future speech through the lens of friendship, and how are you going to feed that friendship? So a concept in feeding is feeding the friendship, and one of the ways that you can do that is just by talking about that relationship for that next season. Let them know you see that friendship continuing when they're home with their parents and you're here at CSU, maybe in Fort Collins or wherever you may be. Right? Tell them, paint the picture of that friendship in that future context, that you see that so that they should see that too. And that can be just either by just talking like, hey, let's, you know, can't wait to just spend some time with you, maybe planning a special trip, right? Like plan a time, you know, in the weekends after spring break to take your cohort, and if you got some guys that are in Denver, do a trip down to Denver. Or maybe they're, if they're out of state, that's okay. How can you pursue them, in that time? And maybe that just means, pursuing that sense of spiritual health in their life and praying for them and letting them know, hey, I was praying for you this week and I just felt like the scripture verse came to mind. You're trying to get them to have encounters with Jesus and encounters with your friendship, right? When we feed them, we're saying that we're trying to get them to emulate those things. We're trying to get them to express what they've encountered. And maybe you're trying to get them to express that, but you're going to have to go back to them learning how to encounter Jesus now in this season and encountering your friendship in this season. What does it look like? It's different when I was together with you and we could, encounter, we could express worship by going to Outpost Live, and we could express our love for Jesus because we were together, and we could express friendship because we'd hang out on the weekends. But now they need to go back to encountering your pursuit in this season if they're ever going to express. You can get to expressing quicker in this next season if you already have that foundation, but you still have to go through that door of pursuit first. So, use that future language. Don't just invite, pursue, and pursue well, and fight for them to experience those things. I think that's probably the biggest just takeaway, is that oftentimes small group leaders, they will do a decent job inviting people in the seasons of breaks or post spring break, for example. They'll invite well, but they've forgotten how to pursue well. So I want to encourage you guys to think through that. And so use future talk, make plans now. And I want to encourage you to make plans for after the break. Make plans to do a camping trip. Make plans to go skiing some weekend. Make plans now where you're really just feeding that friendship through that future talk. But that will immediately translate into a fighting for moment, because in this moment where you can feed them friendship, you can fight for them to experience that friendship after that moment is kind of gone. And so set up those moments now, set up those plans. You're like, I have a hard time making plans for, hanging out on the weekends, that's 3 days from now. And now you're talking 3 weeks from now. I know, stretch that a little bit, but make some plans and you'll be grateful that you did later. I know sometimes you can't physically do that, but again, pray for them and share things that you have heard from the Lord. The other thing that you can do in pursuit is always create belonging cues. Who's somebody in your life that really is good at this? Like, who is somebody that whenever you see them, you feel like $1 million? Who are the relationships that are closest to you in your life, and why were they the closest? What did they do early on in your friendship, or what did maybe you do in that friendship to build that early on? Do that again. Go back to that early phase of that relationship. A lot of times that includes belonging cues is anything that communicates just that, this idea of tethering to each other. Oftentimes when someone sees a friend and they're excited to see that friend, that's a belonging cue. I'm excited to see you again. When you're talking with somebody and you bring up something that in a past conversation was brought up, like, oh yeah, my mom's going on a trip to see her aunt. My aunt's not doing real well. And 2 weeks later, you're having a conversation and that friend brings that up, like, how is your aunt doing? How was your mom's trip? Right? Bringing back to memory, that's a belonging cue. It says, hey, I care about the friendship enough to remember what has been talked about. And it communicates this sense of connection to each other. So create a lot of belonging cues early on after spring break or during spring break, but text them, the first day of spring break or a couple days after, said, hey, miss ya. How's food at home? Whatever. Create belonging cues quickly and regularly in that new season, and you'll create that relationship that can continue in that new season as you begin to forge how the rhythms of doing life together look in this new season. Yeah. Right now, I think I'm going to kind of stop talking here and let you guys talk a little bit. And so if you're watching this video, well, you're obviously watching this video right now, but as you're watching this video right now, go ahead and pause it right here. And we're going to have a few questions on the comments section or in the description section of the YouTube account. We'll also have it up here on the screen here. But here's just a few questions that we want you to just discuss with each other. And as you're in your cohort, talk together about these questions. And I want to encourage you guys, ask, be vulnerable, be authentic, ask each other good questions. These are just baseline questions to springboard from. And we're doing a lot more of peer discipleship and peer mentoring. And even in this moment, this is certainly directed from us, but you're by yourselves, doing this. And so I want to encourage you guys, don't be slow to speak. Don't be, the quiet one, share and let your voice be heard. And discuss with each other, hey, what are you guys learning as a cohort? What have you learned in the past? And what are you thinking about doing in this next season to pursue the guys and gals in your life? All right, so hope you guys had some good discussion and got some good ideas of just thoughts, practical or principle based of how you can pursue your relationships into spring break and after. Now, one thing that I want to talk about is, I remember talking to Jason Bell's brother some years ago, and if the guys remember Jason Bell, who was at our men's advance last year, right before COVID kind of shut everything down. If you can imagine, it's been over a year. But his brother was also in Chi Alpha with him, and he went and pioneered Chi Alpha before we did. But he did really what was really the classic Chi Alpha approach at the time, which was him and his wife went there and just tried to start something by themselves. And so they didn't have any community to invite people into, but they were definitely gathering community around their lives and trying to impart the kingdom into that community. And I just remember this was before we were pioneering, or a few years maybe after we had pioneered, but he had made the comment to me. He said, Nate, I love this approach of doing pioneering as team, because I have been trying for years now to get them to get things. And I think he was talking about honor specifically. He said, honor is such a big thing in our culture in Chi Alpha, and yet I have been fighting for them to understand, honor, and they've been encountering my honor in my life, and honoring them and calling out the identity of God in them and speaking that over them. And yet, he said, they don't get it. They never do it with each other. They love that I do it for them or with them, but they don't emulate that to one another. And he said, I think with the team approach, the thing that he was identifying and recognizing was that suddenly that was working so much better, so much faster, where there was a team, there was a community of people who were doing it together, and they were emulating in front of them, in front of the students, what community should look like. And I would say, as much as we had to kind of learn how to now lead in that, we were able to see things like honor take root in our community a lot faster, a lot more profoundly and deeply in an early phase, because we were able to do that with each other and model that. I think it's interesting, there's this concept floating out there in child development and in parenting that to be honest, it's not always a popular concept because it's a difficult one to wrestle with. But it's this idea that they're finding oftentimes the relationship that the parents have with each other is more important than the relationship that the parents have with their children. Now, both are important, both are critical, but especially when we get to like, oftentimes we do like premarital counseling in Chi Alpha as ministers, and we get to officiate a lot of weddings. We get to marry. You would kind of joke that there's, in clergy terms, there's two big ceremonies in anyone's life. We get to marry and bury. And in Chi Alpha, we get to do a lot of marrying people. And gratefully, we don't have to do, although it can be a very powerful moment, don't do a lot of funerals. But we do walk with people in those early phases of marriage. And it's amazing, when Lindsay and I were getting married, one of our Chi Alpha friends, directors, friends, gave us some material, said, hey, go through this will really help you. And it was all about what was the picture of marriage in your household. Well, how did your parents act with each other? How did they deal with conflict? How did they interact in love and expression of love to one another in front of you? And the whole exercise was basically write down these 20 different paradigms of how your parents expressed their relationship with each other. And it was one of the most profound things Lindsay and I did in our premarital season as we were engaged and getting ready for that marriage season, because we suddenly realized, and would realize in the years to come, so much of what we thought about marriage and perceived about how that relationship should look like was largely based on our parents' relationship. Now, that's not to be fatalistic. Lindsay came from a pretty broken home growing up, and she was never defined by that broken history. In fact, it in some ways strengthened her conviction for the commitment of marriage in her life, that she wanted to hold on to that more than what she saw modeled. But at the same time, the principle applies that there is two kinds of relationships in a household. There is the parent relationship, and then there is the peer relationship. And the parent relationship is the relationship that your parents had with you. And oftentimes that's the relationship that you have with your small group. Now that might, depending on your phase of life and their phase of life, you may be more like a big brother, and of course I get all that stuff. But in some way you're saying, I'm the leader here within this season of walking with you in your faith journey. And so in that sense, there's this parent relationship. And it can be like Jason's brother. You can express love and affection and what community looks like to them. But I would say that a common issue that we have found in our ministry sometimes is that small group leaders have great one-on-one relationships with people, but they often lament how hard it is for them to create community within their small group. Now, the principle that I'm kind of revolving around here is this one that basically says, hey, you need both. You need a parent relationship and you need peer relationships, because the relationship of the parents to each other is going to affect how they are going to express love for one another in that same dynamic of peer relationship. Right? When Lindsay and I got married, suddenly realizing, man, we understand that we have been marked by how our parents expressed their marriage. And it wasn't that we were so much marked in our marriage relationship by the relationship we had with our parents, as much as it was that we were marked by the relationship that they had with each other, because that was the model of how you do that. Now, I've been marked by my parents in how I parent. When I suddenly have kids, that relationship has become far more a model in my head, but they don't always translate one to the other. The relationship of how my parents were to me has translated how I am to my children, and the relationship of my parents and how they were to each other has affected how my wife and I are to one another. And so this idea that it's not enough to just have a parent relationship in your life, but you need to model that with each other if your small group is ever going to understand certain principles, right? If they become a small group leader someday, they'll look at the relationship you had with them as the model of how they should have a relationship with the people that they fight for. But if you never model the peer relationship with one another, they'll never know in your small group how they should interact with each other in the same way. And so that was the thing that Jason's brother was telling me, is like, I can be that parent relationship, but they never seen the peer relationship expressed. The team pioneering had created an opportunity for them for our students to see a peer relationship, whether it was Duncan and Jake and I and Tyler and all the original guys and girls on our staff team. The relationship we had with each other affected the way that our community looked, because they saw how we do that with one another. I think about the example of like Eli Gotro and how he and Jason Bell and Eli Stewart, they had this relationship with each other. And that relationship that they had with each other deeply marked the picture that all of us had in our pioneering of how we should be with each other when we were pioneering. And so the point that I'm getting to is this: do your small group guys and girls know, and do they ever see, do they experience your relationship with the guys and gals alongside of you, the people that are sitting in this room right now as you're watching this video? Does your small group guys and girls, do they see the relationship that you have with those other people in the room? Do they experience? It's another form of fighting for them to experience your community. And oftentimes experiencing your community comes from inviting, right? Fighting for is inviting and pursuing. And where we want to pursue them in our relationship with them after spring break, right now, we need to make sure that we're inviting them to experience the community that we have with each other. Which means a couple of things. Do we have a relationship that we would want emulated? I think about that with Lindsay and I. Like, am I expressing the type of relationship I want my boys to have as husbands to their wives someday? Are you expressing the type of relationship you want your small group to have with each other? Are you modeling that in front of them with the people in your room? And sometimes that just means the way that you talk about your peers to them. You know, do you make them a big deal? Do you love them and honor them in front of them? And sometimes do they experience, sometimes on a weekend hangout, it's far less important how much you're focusing on your small group guys and gals than it is how much you're focusing on your cohort. Because your guys and gals need to experience that community. They need to experience that love, that brotherhood, because that's how they're going to learn how to emulate that in the small group community. And if sometimes we do a good job, kind of like spokes on a wheel, we're good as the center, having a one-on-one relationship with each spoke to that wheel on the exterior of that picture, we have a hard time connecting that wheel to each other around that circle.
I need a drink.
Okay, buddy. I'm going to be done in just a second. I'll get you something to drink, okay? Okay. Give me 1 minute and I'll finish up, okay?
Oh, you said 1 minute.
So, the question that I want to ask you guys is, in weekend hangouts, or during your men's and women's retreats, or in plans for after even spring break, and right now, do you have time and space? Has your small group experienced you fighting for them to experience and encounter real kingdom relationships? If they've experienced that, then they'll learn how to emulate that in their own lives with the other people in your small group. So I want you guys to, again, break out into groups right now and just have some conversations about, in your cohorts and across your cohort line, just in the people in this room right now. I want you guys just to talk about, like, how have you guys done that? How well have you guys done that? In what ways have you learned to love and honor each other to your small group guys and gals? And in what ways have you learned to invite your small group guys and gals to experience your brotherhoods and sisterhoods, those kingdom relationships in your own life. All right, last thing here tonight before we head out. I hope you guys have had some great time just in discussion, in worship, and in resourcing each other about how to find and fight and feed your friends in your life. But a couple of announcements we want to just practically make sure you guys are aware of. One is that Easter weekend is, of course, next weekend, and so there's going to be an Easter hike. And Kellen Sandquist has made some plans that's going to be really cool for anybody that can participate in that. But I want to just make you guys aware, this basically a week from when you're watching this video here today on Sunday, it's Easter Sunday, and at 5:30 a.m., anyone who would like to bring an international friend, they're going to meet at Maxwell Natural Area parking lot. And we'll be trying to get the word out throughout the week here as well to remind you and help you guys know kind of where to go. But Maxwell Natural Area parking lot, 5:30 a.m. this coming Sunday. There's going to be a short gospel message at the top of the hike. And then when you guys come back, there's going to be breakfast in smaller settings at different people's houses. And so that's going to be breakfast around 7:30 or 8. If you're a small group leader who brings an international student, you can come. But you need to bring an international. The hope is for them. And the hope is that you guys will just be intentional with each other to be able to do that. Then the second thing is we want to make sure you guys are aware that LTC practicals are happening this next week. We're still doing, if you heard this last week, how we are basically having them go out and meet 4 people. They should be praying for 2 people and talking about Jesus with 2 people. And typically we try to kind of do both of those together oftentimes. The small group or the LTC students are going to be doing that again this week, basically a repeat. So 4 more people that they need to go out with. And so we're trying to do this at every level. At the big picture level, Wednesday from 11 to 2, on the plaza, we're going to be having just kind of a contact table that we're going to basically just be connecting with anyone who wants to go out and pray for people and going out in 2s from there. Cohorts for LTC are also going to be making plans to do an outreach activity at some point through the week. But we also want to encourage any small group leaders, feel free to talk to them, make sure how's it going, and just encourage them that, hey, if you're going out there and you're expressing love to Jesus in your heart and you're acting it out in expression by trying to pray for people, whatever happens is a win. That's success. But we've had a lot of amazing success. We've had a lot of really cool stories from this last week of people being ministered to and really impacted. And we had a lot of people who just have experienced, somebody saying, hey, I'm not interested. And honestly, that's kind of a win for us in LTC too. We want them to overcome their fear of rejection along the way too. But we want them to experience meaningful conversations along the way. So just help them, encourage them, do that with them. As a ministry, we want to do this with them as much as humanly possible. Next week for Sunday, we're going to do our leadership meeting all together. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the future of leadership next school year while we're all together as well. So be excited for that. Come with some questions. We'll do some Q&A as well. But leadership at Foothills Church, Foothills Assembly, next week at 7 p.m. Just be at probably in the sanctuary, actually. But that will be next Sundays, just so you guys know what's the plan. Last thing, just encourage you guys, come up with a plan to do something for your weekend hangout with your cohort here now, and just make a plan. You guys can break up now from your 2 cohorts having discussion together to now each individually. Just talk about what your plan is for this next weekend. And sometimes it's great to make memories, and if that's what you guys are going to do, I know some people are probably going to be on retreats this next weekend, and that's of course just a go-to, and you kind of have a out, of course, for that's your whole weekend hangout strategy. But if you don't have a retreat this weekend, just want to encourage you guys, Like come up with something. Sometimes memory making is huge. So is sometimes just relaxed love relationship. It can just be as simple as hey, Friday night, my house, we're gonna grill steaks and just hang out. We'll see what happens. But you guys should have a plan of where and when, if nothing else. And if you're gonna make a memory, then it should be a little more detailed than that, with who's doing what to plan that and prep for that. But you guys want to be able to invite your guys and gals through the week. Like, hey, Friday night, a bunch of us are going to be grilling. You want to come over Friday night when you're talking on Wednesday night to Outpost Live or what have you. So go ahead and break out for a last time. Talk about just kind of your weekend strategy. And if you're having a retreat, of course, you can just kind of wrap up here. But hope you guys are having a great Sunday on Palm Sunday here as we celebrate Jesus and what he has done in our life. And let's fight for the King who has fought so hard for us and ours. Love you guys. Have a great day.